Do some squats.
Okay. Let's do it.
Do we?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, here we go.
Yeah.
How many?
Gotta go real slow though.
Real slow.
Okay.
Slow as possible. That's where you get the reps in.
Okay.
Get your camera set up.
And then how many wants to do? Okay.
5. That's right. Go lower, Keke. There you go. Don't fall. Go lower, baby. Not too low. There you go.
Oh my gosh. This is better with weights.
Yeah.
Hey, what are we on?
We're on 10.
The way I am I am so disgusted. Let's get into the video, girl. No, absolutely not. Hi everyone, welcome back to Themis and Thought. Grab your coffee, water, tea, whatever you're drinking, go and get that. Today we're going to be talking about Keke, Keep Talking to Men Palmer. Now, Keke last week decided that she would have a live stream with Blueface, and yes, that Blueface, the prison Blueface, markup all over his face Blueface, the I beat women Blueface, the Blueface with Krishan Rock Blueface, that Blueface. There has been a call to cancel Keke Palmer. And while this video is not a reflection on this call to cancel Keke Palmer, I also don't think I am the arbiter for whether or not Black women in particular should be canceling Keke Palmer, because let's be very clear. Black women are in fact Keke's audience. And if Black women are coming together and saying, no more Keke, this is the absolute last time, 3 strikes and you're out, then I don't have a place in that discussion. What I am here to talk about, however, is kind of looking at Keke Palmer as a kind of mirror into Black womanhood and a larger conversation about the Black community through the lens of Black feminist on one hand, but also having some empathy for Keke Palmer, who is in many ways a product of her environment, the environment being the community from which she came. This way, Keke is not just an individual, she's not just an actor. Rather, she is an archetype for a cultural conversation about the debasement of Black womanhood in support of and defense of Black men who have engaged in problematic behavior. The irony here is very clear. Keke Palmer herself has expressed being a victim of DV. She has talked more directly about being abused by the father of her child, Darius, who we will not get into on this video. But it is important to note that while Keke Palmer is out here running defense for men who have been abusive, and not just Blueface, but we're talking about Chris Brown, R. Kelly, and Jonathan Majors, juggernauts, if you will, in the abuse sector of Black manhood. In watching Keke Palmer run defense for these men, it is baffling, not only because she is a woman defending these kinds of men and providing a platform for these men, but also because she has gone through her own experience as a DV survivor. At least as far as we know, based on her recollection of her engagement with her baby daddy. There is also a separate incident that I think is important to bring up. Trey Songz a couple of years ago with Keke Palmer, where she found herself locked away in a closet, hiding from sexually aggressive men and having to call an Uber to leave the party before she was ready because of all the sexual aggression. Now, that incident alone would be enough to say, well, we would expect Keke Palmer to stand up against men who are abusive. And even if that incident did not happen for her own survival and the survival of her sisters, one would expect Keke Palmer to use her platform to push back against a culture that is exploitative to women and also abusive, right? You would think that. You would also think Keke Palmer would be a person who stands up against a toxic culture for women, particularly if you can remember her going on Wendy Williams and checking Wendy Williams, letting Wendy know that Wendy Williams should have been more compassionate to her. When Keke told the story of being in Trey Songz's home and having to hide in the closet and calling an Uber to leave, Wendy Williams found it funny and made fun of Keke Palmer on her show. Keke then showed up, did an interview, and checked Wendy Williams. I will put that video in the description below. And it was a proud moment for me watching a young lady, Keke Palmer, check an older lady, Wendy Williams, and letting her know that the culture around how men operate and how men mistreat women is not okay. And we have to push back against a culture that allows men to sexually exploit women and intimidate women. That Keke Palmer, one would expect, would stand up against a culture that is sexually intimidating to women and where men are sexually and physically assaulting women. We would expect the Keke Palmer from that Wendy Williams show checking Wendy Williams on Wendy's unwillingness to extend empathy to her, Keke Palmer. But instead, what we have is a Keke Palmer that upholds patriarchy in a way that is disrespectful and dismissive to the pain of women. And this is based again on the men she's platforming. Keke's assertion of who she is and that she is someone with agency, particularly through her book, I Don't Belong to You, is something that reignites the feminist conversation around her. The expectation that fans have that Keke Palmer would not be platforming misogynistic men is not coming from nowhere. Keke has made her career, at least in writing and in the words that she actually says, in defense of women, at least herself. This is the problem I think most of us don't recognize. We ascribe feminism to people like Keke when they are asserting their agency for themselves. Keke's book, I Don't Belong to You, is an assertion. It's a reclamation of self. It is saying, I am a woman in this world and I belong to myself, not to you. You will not sexually intimidate me. The problem for us is when we see someone like that, we automatically assume that they will extend that kind of self-assertion outward beyond themselves to other women and stand up for other women using their platform. Unfortunately for you, Keke is not that girl and she doesn't do this. When Keke told Wendy Williams on that show that we have to be careful of a culture that normalizes violence against women and we need to push back against that culture and stand up for women, it felt more general than it probably was because Keke was defending herself. The evocation of other women and protecting women, while it makes sense, generally, it was not made by Keke. The statement was not made by Keke to express her stance around feminism and her willingness to stand up for other women. Instead, the using of other women was to defend herself. So, and we know this because while she's talking about protecting other women, she was defending Chris Brown. We'll get to that. Keke's defense of problematic men is extensive, and we can look at the big three. We should look at the big three. We're talking about Jonathan Majors, we're talking about R. Kelly, and we're talking about Chris Brown. We all know the story of Jonathan Majors. If you don't, he was found guilty of his engagement with his then girlfriend, a white lady. The pushback online seemed to have been, if this were a black woman, it wouldn't happen. And it wouldn't happen if it were a black woman. Maybe he wouldn't have been found liable, right? Maybe he would not have been found guilty if this were a black woman. And part of the reason is for a long time in American history, the idea that women had to prove that they were abused include using the fact that they had bruising on their body. Guess which color, guess which group of people it's hard to show bruising on? It's not white. And it's not even black. The darker your skin, the harder the bruising is to show. Now, while women, black women in particular, in defense of Jonathan Majors and talking about if you were with a black queen, this wouldn't happen to you, while they're not talking about the bruising on your body, they are specifically talking about the fact that black women are unwilling to put a black man in the system, even at the risk of causing harm to themselves and being abused by that man. While black women were saying, if this were a black queen, it wouldn't happen to Jonathan Majors. They're not trying to express the injustices black women face in the interaction with the justice system and trying to protect themselves. No, that's not what they're talking about. They're not talking about the skin tone and bruising issue that black women face and have to try to overcome. Thankfully, there are new systems in place so that we can test for bruising in other ways. But that's not what black women were talking about. Black women, rather, were talking about how another black woman would not turn Jonathan Majors in. We know that's what they're talking about because they're not saying Jonathan Majors would not be doing this to a black woman, because how would you know that? So the black woman speaking must be talking about the actions on the black woman's part, which is not turning him in, not cooperating with the prosecution. That, I believe, is what black women were talking about. But that is happening. And instead of Keke Palmer being silent or, I don't know, not talking about the issue with Jonathan Majors at all, right? She decided to invite him on her podcast, and she wanted to have a conversation with him, not about his prosecution, but just playing games, it seems, just having fun, a Keke redemption without the accountability part. Right? That's what Keke wanted to do. And when the backlash was swift, Keke pulled back.
It's not just me. I have partners. And so it was then suggested or decided that, without throwing anybody on the bus, that we shouldn't put it out. But I love Megan, and I'm happy for her, and I support her. And when the interview came up, I was, he was interviewing. I felt like, hey, well, let's.
He did a lot of
interviews. Yeah. That's why I was like, well, let's talk. I would
for some reason, you in particular were the one that people was upset about.
Yeah. That's just the way that I think that people are like, not my girl Keke, but it's like, well, she's literally doing.
And it's like, just because you're interviewing somebody doesn't mean you agree with everything. It doesn't mean that. It just means I'm interviewing someone, and this is a conversation, and there could be some questions that the audience wants to know that I'm willing to ask.
Exactly.
But if we don't, if he's not gonna hit you and ain't gonna land, then what's the point?
Yeah.
Right.
You can't interview everybody who just only has your views and your thing. That's weird.
That's CNN.
Exactly.
I'm kidding.
Let's be clear. These people are talking about abuse. It's not just an opinion, a difference of opinion. It's not that. I'm going to go back to this video because I don't want to review Angela Yee's Dusty podcast. I'm not going to do that, so I'm just going to go back to the video I'm making right now. It is my opinion that after that interaction with Jonathan Majors, Keke would have learned something and maybe, not try to defend or work with, live stream with Blueface, playing around like this man is not a toxic degenerate. No, that's not what Keke did. Keke Palmer, instead of learning from the Jonathan Majors engagement, decided instead to not learn from it and then go forward and defend Blueface. We will get to why I call it a defense, because I think normalizing a behavior, normalizing a person who engage in bad behavior, pretending like it's natural to just be around an abuser is a good thing, is a defense of that person. So, it did not start or stop at Jonathan Majors. We also have R. Kelly, which for some reason, Keke felt the need to affectionately refer to him as Kels. Now, I can't play the Breakfast Club video because Breakfast Club tend to have this copyright issue, and I don't want to play with iHeartRadio. Now, in this interview, Keke seemed to suggest that what R. Kelly does to women is what men do. And that she has never experienced any of the things that these women are talking about. And she just pretty much talked about how amazing R. Kelly was. Now, It is one thing to say, I don't know, in reference to some abuse that have taken place. It is another thing to say, I don't know about R. Kelly. There is no possible way the world did not know about R. Kelly. When the Boondocks episode dropped on R. Kelly, we all knew what he did. When we talked about Aaliyah's engagement and subsequent marriage, allegedly, with R. Kelly, we knew what he did. When those videos came out with R. Kelly and that girl, we know what he did, allegedly. And therefore, and for some of this, we don't have to say allegedly because he's behind bars currently. So it is odd that Keke would retract all her support publicly of R. Kelly when the documentary came out later. Why were you supporting him in the first place? And no, this is not one of those things where ignorance was remedy, knowledge caused growth, and Keke Palmer came out and acknowledged her ignorance. No, she did not care. She knew at the time who R. Kelly was. Everyone knew who R. Kelly was. We simply did not care as a community, and Keke Palmer was a part of that community who did not care, and she took it further. Not only did Keke Palmer not care about the victims, rather, Keke Palmer went and defended R. Kelly. In a culture that tells young girls they're too fast, instead of going after the predators, we have a problem. Keke Palmer, when it came to Chris Brown, in the initial stage of her defense of Chris Brown post Rihanna and what happened to Rihanna in engagement with Chris Brown, Keke Palmer was less direct. Keke Palmer brought on Karrueche Tran. This was Chris Brown's girlfriend, ex at the time, to talk about her experience, not with Chris Brown, but with Rihanna and Rihanna's fans. Karrueche in the interview painted Rihanna out to be a villain, where she was fighting against Rihanna and then millions of Rihanna's fans. The interview was done to shape Karrueche as a victim of Rihanna and make Rihanna out to be a perpetrator of harm towards Karrueche in the midst of a public campaign against Rihanna by people who did not like her and did not like the sympathy Rihanna was receiving based on the pictures we saw of her face after the abuse with Chris Brown, after Chris Brown abused her. He came out later, talk about how he grew up on that man, how she grew up on that man. This is Chris Brown. People need to leave Chris Brown alone. Chris Brown is the greatest performer in the world. And that people, the implication Keke made was that people were trying to tear Chris Brown down, and she did not like the fact that we wanted to tear Chris Brown down. No mention of what Chris Brown was doing to make people want to tear him down, but Keke was out there defending Chris Brown because people want to take him down. Throughout the years, Keke would continuously announce how amazing Chris Brown is and how she loves her some Chris Brown and he's the greatest of all time. And if Chris Brown even looked in the direction of dark skin or brown skin girl, she might be in the running. I don't know. I just made that last one up. But it is interesting because, like Doche said, girl, get up. Girl, stand. That's what I want to tell Keke. Girl, stand up. Ain't nobody got time. So now, if you watch any of the videos coming out with Keke Palmer and Blueface, what you will see is a woman online with Blueface just flirting it up. She, at one point, I think she said she was going to show some yoga poses or so. It was the debasement of oneself in an effort to connect with someone like Blueface from someone like Keke Palmer is actually kind of insane. But I'm not actually here to talk about her flirting it up and live streaming and trying to get clicks and views online, because we're in this weird social media era where the more vulgar and degenerate you are, the more likely you are to get clicks and views. And so watching Keke trying to grab that through Blueface is really disgusting to me, because it looks like Keke does not know who she is. And that, one of the worst things, I think, for Black women in particular who've been extraordinarily successful, hopefully rich, but extraordinarily successful, is that they tend to not know who they are. And I don't think that is by mistake. I think that's definitely by design. For people who might question whether or not I'm too hard on Blueface, I'm not. In fact, I could be harder. Like, when I knew that DDG and Holly wasn't going to work immediately was when I saw that DDG had Holly hanging out with Krishan Rock and Blueface. As soon as I saw the company, I knew immediately how the end of DDG and Holly's relationship was going to go. I knew it. I mean, you all knew it too. So it's nothing new. We all knew it. But it was at that moment, the very moment that I saw DDG, Holly Bailey, Krishan Rock, and Blueface double dating, was like, yeah, I know. Yeah, I know. I know for some people, it seems that I've been a little bit hard on Keke Palmer. Hopefully my harshness came with a lot of grace and empathy, but I don't mean to be harsh. And this is why I am not a part of the cancel Keke Palmer train. I don't know that I ever will be, but it is understandable why people are at that place. The reason I am not there is that I don't think Keke, as I said in the beginning, is a representation just of herself or herself, the actor. I think she's an archetype in a way that provides a kind of mirror into Black womanhood. If I could be as direct as I can, I do think she's a mirror into Black womanhood more generally. And what I mean by that is, regardless of how high a Black woman climbs, regardless of her success in beating all the odds and thriving despite, not because of, a culture that rejects her and repeatedly tells her to have low self-esteem, regardless of how much she accomplishes, no Black man is too low for her. No Black man, regardless of the propensity for violence, no Black man, regardless of his criminal records legitimately, no Black man, regardless of employment, is too low for her. And that is a cultural, systemic problem. It is not an individual woman's problem. We know it's not individual because of how pervasive it is. That a woman who has accomplished so much is being anchored, and not anchored in a good way, being stabilized. No. Being dragged underwater by the man in her life. Uplifting Black men become kind of a spiritual, religious activity for Black women, regardless of where they are in life. And if your goal is to uplift Black men, then you might go to the bottom, the depths of hell to get one in order to bring them out. The issue generally isn't even the attempt to help men or women. That's not the issue. The issue is that in the attempt to help some of these men, a lot of these women lose a lot of their livelihood in the process. And that is a problem. We talk about Black womanhood in this way, helping Black men and helping the community, all good things in isolation. It is a lack of reciprocity that is a problem. It is the devaluing of Black womanhood and making womanhood, Black womanhood in particular, masculinized by the men that are being saved by the action of these women. So when we think about a quote-unquote strong Black woman, the negative stereotypes seem to dominate because of the political, social, and cultural conversations happening online by Black men who these Black women want to save. So the masculine, quote-unquote, behavior is having a job, succeeding, going to school, like regular things that both men and women should be doing. And instead of praising women who do this, Black women in particular, they're demonized, called masculine and too strong. And the question is, why continue to give the thing that people shame you for? Well, again, culture. The culture demands Black women have low self-esteem and further demands that they show up for all kinds of Black men, even to their own detriment. This is part of the intra-community dynamic where Black women even put themselves at risk and not inform or tell on or call the police on black men because they do not want to be a part of the criminalization process of black men. The narrative and truth around police brutality and racism in the system as it affects black men becomes central to the psyche of black women, who now feels obligated to sacrifice themselves at the altar of black male worship by taking care of men who do not do the same in return, who actually cause harm directly to these women. Women online calling for DV to be decriminalized is absolutely insane, and they are online calling for domestic violence to be decriminalized. Women, black women in particular, are doing that. Kimberly Nicole Foster, love you, girl, but I mean, you did it, so had to call that out. And to know that black women are being unalived by black men and the DV rate is at like 3 times the level of that of white women calls into question the judgment around the sacrifice and what that yields for not just the black woman doing it, but other black women in the community and black girls who are being raised in a culture that tells them that they have to sacrifice themselves for the well-being of a man. Dating down also becomes a part of the black woman narrative. We see this fully on display in that clip with Steve Harvey, right, and Keke Palmer, and Keke's reluctance to date up financially. And there is a kind of obligation for her to date down. The Keke Nicki Minaj-esque personas in women who feel like they should be the providers for men generally does not turn out good for those women. Next, the kind of internalized misogyny that exists for Keke Palmer is a bit more covert, because while she does defend these men, she does not overtly go against women, but by covering for these kinds of toxic men, you are inevitably going to go up against these women, right? Like that's just what it is. But it is the centering of the male's rehabilitation as opposed to the victim and what they're going through that rings true as it relates to the internalized patriarchy from Keke's perspective. While she does not call them women out of their names, it's you are putting the men who cause harm to these women in front of your camera on your platform to normalize them and their behavior and reintroduce them into a community that should be rejecting them for their behavior, and makes the culture that shames women that much more difficult to contend with because of Keke Palmer. Kimberly Crenshaw, in discussing intersectionality, places black women at a very specific juncture, right? It is you're black and you're a woman. There's racism and sexism, and yet black women are thriving, or at least attempting to do better, create a better life for themselves and their family. In that process, as I've explained before, there is a kind of race loyalty that extends to black men in a way that allows black men to behave poorly while black women cover for them. It then becomes very difficult for the system to take black women's pain seriously when black women are unwilling to throw the person causing her harm under the proverbial bus. The protect the black community ethos fundamentally is about protecting black men. In this way, black women become emotional rehabilitation centers for black men. The problem with this is, instead of rehab and becoming better, these men tend to invalidate the woman's experience, but also diminishes her life significantly. The lack of contribution, that is, and I do include contribution financially. The confluence of racial solidarity and internalized patriarchy creates a Keke Palmer archetype where this person, Keke, uplifts men. And I don't know that it is intentionally to rub it in the face of women, but I think it is instinctive. It is a part of the programming for a woman like Keke Palmer to defend men and see the best in men and pull the best out of men and be in community with men who are dangerous, hoping that they are not dangerous to her, at the cost of herself and also ignoring her own experiences with other black men of the same ilk. Thus, Keke in this way is a product of our cultural reality. She's not different from most black women, and she's acting in a way that most black women would. It's just she has more resources and attention, easier to criticize for behaviors we're all too familiar with, that allows certain kind of men to run amok. I think it is okay to critique Keke Palmer, but I do think we should be critiquing ourselves and each other in the way that we critique Keke Palmer, because what Keke does is not an isolated thing that happens just for her. It's a community level thing that I believe breeds further degeneracy. So that is my take. What is the issue with Keke Palmer? Well, a lot, but I don't know that it is productive to only center Keke Palmer in the discussion of her behavior. I think it is important to reflect on our own contribution to toxicity within the culture, even if we're looking at it through the lens of what happened with Keke Palmer and Blueface. Now, that is my Tuesday morning take. It is a Tuesday morning take. I want to know what your thoughts are down in the comment section. Remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you again later. Okay, hey guys, so I almost forgot that I needed to respond to one of my comments from last week, one of the comments from last week's video. Now, the video that I'm referencing is the one where we were talking about a side chick who came out and talked about her side of the story. If you remember, she flew to meet a married man to sleep in a one-bedroom sort of apartment with this man. A one-bedroom hotel room. It was one bed in the hotel room, and that's where she went with a married man that she thought was going to marry her. The man was already married. Now, that lady got dragged. Now, the comment said, quote, from N.M. Hoskins, I think Themis is being too hard on the side chick. She is in her early 20s. She lacked the experience of dealing with men due to her age. Also, the wife first talked about her on social media. The side chick is defending herself. She was also seeking mentorship from this man to create a successful business. Yeah, no. I was not too harsh. She was not seeking just mentorship. You do not tell me that. Absolutely not. You know the man is married. You went to a hotel with this man in a different city, and there was only one bed. You broke up with your boyfriend before going there. You said that you did certain things with him because you thought he would marry you. No, I was not too harsh. I do not agree with you. Now, obviously, we can have a differing opinion, and I don't want you to ever feel like your opinion doesn't matter. But yeah, I feel like if you're over 19, you going to be with a man who is married is a problem. Now, their relationship is not your problem. Your moral and your ethics, that's your problem. He and his wife, their marriage is their problem. But I do question your morality to sleep with a married man. I do. Yeah, sure do. Now, could I have been? No, I couldn't have. That's my position. I'm sorry. You can drag me again in the comments down here and I won't respond again. But she was not. Love you all. Have a wonderful, wonderful time. Remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe. And I will see you again later. Bye.